The dawn hung over the taiga. A middle-aged man in green fatigues brewed tea with trembling hands. He had worked as a ranger for many years, ever since his wife and only daughter burned alive in an old apartment building on the outskirts of the capital. But today, something had happened that made his heart pound against his ribs once more. During his regular rounds, as twilight descended upon the forest, he saw silhouettes among the old tree trunks. He couldn't tell what they were doing in the growing darkness. The figures seemed human, but an inexplicable fear gripped him. A feeling of anxiety twisted his insides, and the man backed away. The crunch of a branch under his boot gave him away. The shadows ahead froze, as if listening. When they turned, his heart nearly leapt into his throat. They weren't people, but some kind of strange creatures with black, contorted faces. The man ran for his life, fleeing that cursed place. He reached the ranger station well after dark. Now, clutching a cup of hot tea and having calmed down slightly, he periodically glanced out the window. There was no pursuit. The man finally let out a breath of relief. At that moment, a sharp crash and the sound of shattering glass sent a flock of northern birds erupting into a clamor. A gnawed-off bear's head flew through the window and landed on the floor with a crash. Bizarre silhouettes danced outside, pounding on the walls. A scream filled with pain and horror was swallowed by the taiga. The ring of my cell phone broke the morning silence just as I was finishing my coffee. Hello? Denis, hello. How are you? Fyodor Sergeyevich, good morning. Everything's great, just enjoying my vacation, so to speak. How would you feel about another little trip to the health resort? Where to this time? I asked. Come to the office. You know the drill. I'll be waiting, the man said and hung up. So much for a quiet evening, I mumbled, pulling on my jacket. Well, what did you expect? You're the one who put on the uniform, a voice in my head remarked. I had grown used to Nan's voice. It had become a familiar and ordinary part of my life. In the short time since he'd appeared, I'd come to trust him. And if I was being called in, it meant the case was far from simple. The street met me with a cool evening air under a clear, cloudless sky. Rush hour was beginning, so I decided to hurry to avoid traffic. By the way, I never saw Nastia again. She gave me her Instagram, but I never wrote. Maybe it was for the best. As my mentor once said, guys like us shouldn't have families. It's a direct threat not only to our work but to our personal safety. So, I couldn't even dream of a family life. Besides, the job took up too much time to ever get bored. I arrived without incident. The chief was waiting for me on the steps of the main entrance to our interesting establishment. Good to see you, Fyodor Sergeyevich, I said, extending my hand. Hello, Denis. How was the vacation? Like a fairy tale. So what's the case? I asked, deciding not to beat around the bush. Alright, here's the situation. In the village of Parma, Usinski district, a ranger has vanished without a trace from the forestry service. A few days before his shift was supposed to end, he stopped making contact. This guy is an experienced, seasoned woodsman. At first, they thought the batteries in his radio died. A couple of days later, his replacement arrived, and they went out to the station. They get there, windows broken, doors wide open, and nobody's home. They've searched a 7-kilometer square around the ranger's location and haven't found a single trace. And you know the kind of guys they have on the search parties. He paused, then continued, you know what? We'll set you up as the new ranger there. You'll go to that station not as an investigator. Experienced men don't just disappear in the taiga like that. Figure out what's going on, then report back. All your papers will be ready by morning. Yes, General. I'll get to the bottom of it, I replied with a sharp nod. On the way home, I mulled over the new case. Back to the woods again. I had nothing against nature. In my experience, the most interesting and mysterious things happen out there. But a new territory, with its own quirks, is dangerous enough on its own. And now I had to find someone again. How long will it take to get to this godforsaken place? I wondered. You're better off flying, Nan's voice immediately answered. The flight is 2.5 hours. From there, it's only 20 minutes to Parma. So relax and enjoy the trip. You can tense up later. You think so? I'm sure, Nan said, and the connection cut. I was used to the voice, but it still felt like I was constantly wearing an earpiece, which could be unsettling at times. When I got home, I crashed almost immediately. The next day promised to be a long one. All the flights and drives had long since become routine, a familiar grind. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm, a habit from years of rising at the same time. I made a simple breakfast of ham sandwiches and sweet black coffee, no cream. Then, deciding not to waste time, I left for work early. I picked up the necessary documents from the office and headed to the airport. A couple of hours later, I was gazing out the window at the vast expanse of the sky and drifted off to sleep without realizing it. I woke up an hour before landing, and thanks to an internal compass of sorts, I knew the exact route I needed to take. As I walked toward the taxi stand, I saw a short man leaning against a black Lada Kalina. I immediately liked his good-natured face. He seemed talkative. "Good day," I said. "Need a ride to the Taramak Hotel? I'll pay 500. Why not? Get in. Throw your bag in the back," the man replied with a smile. "You a tourist, or here for work?" "Work, I guess," I said, closing the door. "What kind of work?" the man pressed. "I'm the new ranger, taking the old one's place." "No kidding? You're going to the far station, then?" he asked, his tone shifting. "Looks that way. Is something wrong?" "Everything would be fine, but for the past year, they've been finding mauled animals out there, hares, bears. The police even opened a case. A week later, the investigator handling it was found in his apartment, drained of blood. They said it looked like he'd been put through a meat grinder, kid." I seem to have a knack for getting talkative taxi drivers. Every time I strike up a conversation, I get an information dump. I couldn't help but shiver, but I didn't interrupt. "And then," he continued, "people started disappearing in our forests and swamps. Mushroom pickers, hunters. Well, disappearing, some they found in fits of hysterical laughter. Before they died, they all rambled about demons playing games in the forest by the old bogs." "Playing games? What do you mean?" I couldn't help but ask. "Literally. They said the demons sit by the marshes and toss human bones to each other. Those folks, of course, were sent to the madhouse under special observation. But others, they were found hanging from their own skin. Nobody goes there anymore." "How do you know all this, and in such detail?" "Kid, you work as a taxi driver as long as I have. You'll hear even crazier things. Who knows what really happened out there? But something's definitely wrong with that far station, especially since those people vanished nearby. And the old ranger, Yefimich, he disappeared right from the station itself. I can tell you that for sure. He was my first wife's cousin. So yeah, maybe it's nothing, but you'd better watch your back. Oh, here's your Taramak. They say it's a good hotel." He was right. The log cabin hotel, built in an old Slavic style, was genuinely impressive. The cozy combination of wood and stone gave it an atmosphere of somber antiquity, while modern touches like free Wi-Fi and a smart TV in the room added a contemporary feel. I had today to rest. I wasn't scheduled to meet my superiors and start my shift until tomorrow. For now, I needed to eat. Luckily, the hotel had a well-regarded restaurant. I went downstairs. The dining hall was decorated in the same style as the hotel. Light Slavic music played softly, and the room was uncrowded, making it an oasis after the jam-packed pubs of Moscow. I ordered a simple dinner and 150 grams of firewater, and waited, taking in the interior. Later, after a satisfying meal and a drink, I stepped out of the restaurant and sat on a bench next to an urn. "Oh, there you are." I turned at the sound of the voice and saw a young man in green military-style fatigues approaching me. "Can I help you?" I asked, looking him over. "Are you our new ranger?" the young man asked uncertainly. "Perhaps. And you are?" "Oh, my apologies. Assistant Director of the Forestry Service, Sergei Dmitrievich," the kid said, extending his hand. "A pleasure. Starkov, Andrei," I replied, using my new alias for this assignment. It was a good thing I remembered it. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this search party?" I asked, lighting a cigarette. "Well, the thing is, Ignat Valerievich, our director, instructed me to brief you and escort you to your new post." "I see," I said. "Well then, enlighten me." "Our reserve is vast, divided into sectors, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Your station is number 7, the last one. It's located on the edge of what we call the Basov Bogs, the Demon Bogs." "Is it true that people disappear out there?" I asked, interrupting him. "You've heard the rumors, then." "Well, what can I say? It is what it is. People do go missing, but this is the Taiga, not Central Park. These are old, wild places. Being on your guard at all times is the main rule here." "Sounds like you have a cheerful place," I said. "All right, let's head out tomorrow at 9 to see the estate." I tossed my cigarette butt into the urn. Until tomorrow, then, the young man said as he walked away. I just waved and went back up to my room. Doesn't look like a man of the woods. More like a polished desk jockey, Non commented. Agreed. He's too clean cut. The Taiga doesn't like his kind. The next morning, after a shower, I quickly changed into my work clothes. After dropping the key at the reception desk, I stepped out of the hotel. The same young man was waiting for me, dressed in military gear and standing next to an old UAZ Patriot. Good morning, I said with a wave, getting into the vehicle. Hello. Straight to the station? Yeah, why wait? I said, settling in and closing the door. The urban landscape quickly gave way to a no less picturesque residential area. Soon, a road sign pointed toward the bogs. Wooden houses became a rare sight, replaced by low hills covered in spruce and fir forests. We're almost there, Sergei said with a smile. Why haven't I seen any other ranger stations? I asked, glancing at him. The far station has its own road. You can, of course, drive through the other stations, but it's not very convenient. After an hour's drive, the gravel road ended, and a rough track wound through a forest of triangular spruces mixed with arrow-straight firs. I immediately spotted the wooden cabin perched on a small hill. The forest road dipped into a hollow. Up close, the cabin seemed even taller. Well, here we are, the young man said with a smile, stopping the vehicle. I got out and looked around. The camp was indeed situated in a hollow. This added a certain gloominess to the place. In the shade of the tall pines, there were several other small wooden buildings, connected by neat paths paved with logs. The entire area looked well tended. Whoever lived and worked here knew and loved their job. From this, I concluded he couldn't have just vanished without a trace. But to leave no obvious signs of an escape? That was certainly possible. If it was an escape, why? And if someone dragged him away, again, why? While I was lost in thought, the young man unloaded a new gas cylinder, a month's supply of food, and extra fuel from the trailer. We carried it all into one of the outbuildings, which already housed a gasoline generator and various tools. Hunting snares for all sorts of game hung on the wooden walls. In a corner, on a shelf, I saw several traps. Not bad, I thought with a smile and followed my guide. The other buildings turned out to be a woodshed, an outhouse, and a banya. Finally, we entered the main cabin, which had a sharp smell of wood varnish and linseed oil. It looked like it had been recently renovated. Inside, the house was spacious, with 2 large rooms and a large, white brick stove. After signing some papers, Sergei handed me a brand new Taiga rifle with 5 boxes of ammunition and finally left. He seemed shady and slippery to me. That kid is up to something. Non's voice came, right on cue. He definitely knows something and is trying hard to hide it. You think there was a firefight here? A real bloody one? But why would they renovate the place if the ranger just disappeared? Non had a point. There was only one way to be sure. I took off my backpack and pulled out my special equipment, a small lamp and a spray bottle. I sprayed the chemical on one of the walls. In the ultraviolet light, it glowed with huge white splotches. It was clear I didn't need to waste the reagent on the other walls. I told you to listen to your elders. Maybe you'll learn, Non quipped. Damn, this changed things. I put the kettle on the gas stove and sat down on an old stool. All the coziness had evaporated from the house, and the lower the sun sank, the more uncomfortable I felt. It was no joke, sitting in a house where someone had been torn to pieces, and someone else had meticulously tried to cover it up. Tomorrow, I need to inspect the area more thoroughly. But for now, coffee. I pulled a large jar of instant coffee and a pack of powdered creamer from my backpack. The kitchen was spacious, and if not for the circumstances that brought me here, I would have gladly lived in a place like this. I spooned 2 teaspoons into my mug and poured in the boiling water. The sunset was burning in an orange blaze when I stepped out of the cabin and sat on the porch. The night world was awakening in the crowns of the evergreen firs. A palpable chill drifted from the nearby stream. Cicadas chirped in the thickets. The atmosphere seemed peaceful, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt a sense of uncontrollable anxiety. I sat for a little longer, then went back inside, finishing my now cool coffee. I flipped the generator switch, and light flooded the cabin, making it feel a little cozier. On one wall hung a list of the ranger stations with their communication channels. I was number 7 on that list. On the opposite wall was an old map of the entire reserve. I picked up my rifle and began loading the magazines. I chambered a round and placed the weapon by the bed. Then, taking a frying pan from the wall, I set it on the stove. Thoughts are thoughts, but dinner is on schedule. I grabbed a couple of cans of stewed meat and a plastic bag of buckwheat, whipped up a simple meal, and put a movie on my laptop. I got completely absorbed. I lifted my eyes from the screen only when deep night had fallen outside and the end credits were rolling. It was 3 a.m. The movie had helped to clear my head and push away the unnecessary thoughts. I stood up from the stool, stretching my stiff legs, and walked to the front door. I flipped on the porch light, stepped outside, lit a cigarette, and sat on the steps. The forest was not asleep. It whispered with the calls of nocturnal birds in the ancient treetops. Life teemed on the old, fallen leaves. A cool breeze carried the scent of river mint from the stream. The single LED bulb barely pierced the darkness. After finishing my cigarette, I went back inside to sleep, turning off the porch light. The night was quiet. No sounds or insects bothered me. I woke up to my alarm, made coffee, and began to unpack my host's supplies. Pasta, canned goods, everything found its place. I decided to explore the premises more carefully. In the small entryway, tucked away among old, yellowed newspapers intended for kindling, I found a small logbook. Well, what have we here? I murmured, reaching for the notebook. Deciding to deal with my find later, I put it in my breast pocket. I went into the storage shed and examined the snares again. You've got to be kidding me. The wire hasn't even had time to tarnish. This further confirmed my suspicions. My inner voice insisted that the experienced ranger hadn't just disappeared. Non was right. Nothing here was simple. The day flew by as I inspected the territory. Twilight was settling over the forest when I went inside to fry some potatoes with lard and onions. Soon, a wonderful aroma filled the house. I pulled a flask and a couple of camp shot glasses from my backpack. A meal like this deserved a little something extra. I had barely finished the thought when I heard the frantic barking of a dog. I quietly drew my Tokarev pistol, flicked off the safety, and stood by the door. A minute later, I heard footsteps and a knock. Who is it? I asked in a calm voice. Hey, man, open up. I'm your colleague, the ranger from Station 5. Got held up while fishing. I was walking back and saw a light on at the far station, figured I'd drop by. I put the gun away, kicked a pair of nearby work boots out of sight, and opened the door. Standing before me was a middle-aged man with short-cropped gray hair, dressed in green digital camo. An old TOZ shotgun was slung over his right shoulder. Mikhail, the man said, extending his hand. Andre, I replied with a smile, shaking it. Come on in, you're just in time for potatoes, I added, setting out a glass for my guest. Well, thank you kindly. Wish every station had a welcome like this, Misha noted with a grin, sitting down at the table. We had a drink, lit cigarettes, and a simple but very interesting conversation began. So, you're the one taking Petrovich's place now, huh? Damn shame. He was a good old soul. Wait, I thought he just went missing, not died. In these parts, if you go missing, you're dead, Misha added, shoveling a spoonful of crispy potatoes into his mouth. Let's have another, I said with a smile, raising my glass. To us, Misha said, downing his drink. You know, between us, I was here after the old man disappeared. They pulled us from our stations for some unscheduled repairs. We get here, walk up to the house, and it's a total disaster, pardon my French. The window was just an empty frame, door hanging open. When we went inside, well, each of us just about dropped. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they were all spattered with blood. But there was no one around, Andre. No one and nothing. Our local cop, Fedya Lykov, threw up at the sight of it and fainted. Later, the chief of the local police department himself came with his detectives. They sniffed around, but found nothing. I see, Misha replied, knocking back another shot. Alright, it's time to get some sleep. You can crash on the couch. No sense in wandering through the taiga drunk, I said, getting up from the stool. You're a good man, Andreyuka. Not bad, I said, pulling on my work clothes. I had to do my rounds tomorrow, otherwise I'd stay up. Hey, how about I go with you? I can show you around. Sure, why not, I smiled. He pulled off his boots and went to sleep in the other room. I couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking, piecing together the facts and what I'd heard during the day. Then I remembered the journal in my pocket. I took out the notebook and sat down to read. The last entries were very unusual. April 23, 2018. Arrived for my next shift and went straight to duty. Inspected my area, nothing unusual so far. Rounds tomorrow. April 24, 2018. Heading out on my rounds. Demon was restless all night, couldn't settle down. Whining, tail wagging sadly, just looking at me with those sad eyes. April 26, 2018. The damn dog senses something. My god, I've lived for so many years and never seen anything like it. Yesterday, during my rounds near the old bogs, I found 4 lynxes. They were cleanly skinned, but not a single track around. I know this land, I've worked here for years. It's impossible. April 27, 2018. Something devilish is happening. Last night, someone was walking around the house, knocking on the walls. It felt like someone was throwing sickles at the walls. I don't know what to do. The radio's not working. I'm all alone out here, except for the dog. I'm a grown man, but I'm trembling like a little boy. I lay there reading, goosebumps crawling over my skin as I realized it all happened in this very house. I'd seen a lot, but this was getting under my skin. Suddenly, the lights in the entire house went out. As if on cue, like in some B-grade horror movie. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized I'd left my flashlight on the kitchen table, and my gun was by the bed where Misha was sleeping. I started toward the kitchen, trying to cross the distance as quickly as possible. I heard Misha stir. "Andre, what happened to the lights?" he mumbled. Then I felt a sharp impact, and sparks flew before my eyes. "Holy hell," I groaned, turning on my flashlight. Misha was on the floor, rubbing his forehead. "You got a head like a cannonball." I got up to take a leak, he explained, getting to his feet, and it was pitch black. I was fumbling around, couldn't find a flashlight or a lighter, got turned around, and then you came flying out of nowhere. "Yeah, a flying saucer colliding with a bunker," I chuckled. Just then, I heard a strange laugh. The sound came from outside, and it wasn't male or female. It felt like someone was running around the house, light on their feet, only the moss crunching underfoot. It was pure supernatural horror. I couldn't describe it any other way. Misha peered out the window and recoiled as if he'd seen the devil himself, pointing with a trembling hand. I looked. Silhouettes were flitting past the windows. I fumbled for my rifle and fired straight through the glass. Silence. In the distance, I heard retreating footsteps and a strange rustling sound. "What the hell was that just now?" Misha stammered. "What did it look like?" "Some cheap horror flick from the late 90s. Don't forget, you still signed up to go on patrol with me today," I added, softly racking the bolt. "Damn it," he muttered in frustration. "What happened to the lights? Did they cut the wire?" "Let's go see what's out there," I said, turning on my flashlight. The fear was replaced by a sportsman's thrill and raw curiosity. I stepped outside and headed for the shed. I didn't see anyone on the way. Then I carefully inspected the door for anything unusual. "Andriuka, get over here. You've got to see this yourself," Misha shouted. I walked over to the window where my lead gift had been delivered to our uninvited guest. "What is all this blue crap sprayed everywhere?" Misha asked, looking at me. To be honest, I was stunned myself. It was the reagent for removing biological materials. "Why would they need this?" Misha asked. "Damned if I know," I replied. "This is all just strange." Dawn began to break, and we decided to set out. But first, we thoroughly checked everything one more time. No one wants to leave unknowns behind, especially when personal safety is at stake. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, we found nothing new. We secured the window with a steel sheet and set off. "Hey Misha, where's that shotgun of yours?" I asked with a smile. "Ah, for crying out loud," he grumbled and headed back toward the house. "So, what do you think about all this?" I thought to myself, listening for a reply. None didn't keep me waiting. "I think this patrol will put everything in its place." "Alright, let's go," Misha said, approaching with his TOZ in hand. "You should have bought a new one ages ago. I feel sorry for the old thing. My late grandfather owned it, and he left it to me before he died," he said. I nodded respectfully in response. We set out on the route. The old forest breathed with a pine-scented coolness. A light breeze carried a sweetish smell of rotten meat from somewhere ahead. The farther we went, the stronger the stench became. Soon, it was clear the smell was coming from a nearby ravine filled with forest debris. We got closer and, after clearing away some blackened, old deadwood, we found it. The carcass of a bear. Its belly was slit open, and its internal organs were missing. Same as always. Not a single gunshot wound, Misha hissed through his teeth, spitting on the ground. We photographed the gruesome find, made a note on the map, and after completing the necessary procedures, we moved on. The path wound between forest pits filled with a toxic green sludge and circled around ravines. The hilly terrain significantly slowed our pace. We were constantly ascending and descending. The slippery green moss, laced with cobwebs of mold, sprang under our feet. It was getting dark when we reached an old cemetery, now just a collection of mounds covered in moss. As we drew closer, we froze in our tracks. Several graves were dug up. No, they hadn't collapsed. They had been deliberately excavated. But why, and by whom? It was completely baffling. We looked closer and realized there were no bones in the pits. What is happening here? Misha muttered, his hand trembling as he crossed himself. Truly, strange and inexplicable things were happening in this forest. Things for which neither of us could offer a logical explanation. But as it turned out, this was only the tip of the iceberg. By the time we reached the bed of an old, dried-up river, twilight had already descended upon the forest. The vibrant life of the day had been replaced by the no less active nightlife. The tight beams of our searchlights didn't help our progress much, but it was better than nothing. When we reached the border of my territory, it was already 10 p.m. Beyond this point lay the bogs. We switched off our flashlights and peered intently into the darkness. As our eyes adjusted, we saw the faint outlines of some houses. The forest thinned out here, and the moon managed to break through the canopy, providing some minimal light. "Hey, what are those little houses over there?" I asked in a low voice. "That's an abandoned village. It's been empty for 40 years. It's not even on the map," Misha replied. "Abandoned, you say? Then why are there lights in the windows?" I countered. "Lights?" Misha started, straining to see something. "Holy Mother. You're right, there are lights. Where could they have come from? None of the locals would go there. There's nothing to take. And outsiders would never find the road." He trailed off, his eyes fixed on the crooked wooden shacks. Then he added, "Listen, maybe we should go back. To hell with this. We've seen enough." "No, my friend. We need to get into that village." "Why the hell do we need to do that? Have you lost your mind?" "Listen, Misha, I'm an FSB agent. I'm here investigating the disappearance of the ranger and the death of that investigator," I said flatly. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me. How did I get dragged into this mess?" Misha lamented. "Hey, don't start planning your funeral just yet," I said, trying to reassure him. "Will I at least get a medal for this?" "Yeah, I'll carve one out of wood for you myself. But seriously, I'll think of a way to thank you. Let's not go now, though. We'll wait until dawn. It's too dark to see a damn thing right now." Misha visibly relaxed and perked up a bit. Then something happened that sent an unpleasant chill down both our spines. Strange silhouettes began to emerge from the houses. The creak of their footsteps was unnervingly loud in the dead quiet, setting our teeth on edge. The figures wandered around the area, carrying things, bringing items into and out of the houses. They looked human, but they were covered in branches and leaves. I looked closer, and a clear thought flashed in my mind. The figures were wearing ghillie suits. But who were they, and what were they doing here? It was a complete mystery. We lay hidden until dawn, observing the scene. They were hauling some kind of sacks and boxes. I had no desire to provoke a conflict with them at that moment. Looking slightly to the side, I noticed several camouflage traps. That meant the path was likely booby-trapped. "Listen, there are more traps over there than fleas on a stray dog," Misha mumbled. "I see them. And on my side, there are a few strange piles covered with branches," I replied. Dawn came quickly. "Listen, Misha, take this rifle. Leave your old shotgun here. You don't want to lose it, it's a keepsake, after all." "I promise I'll get you a new one," I said with a smile, pulling out my tokarev, a suppressor already attached. "Damn, you got any grenades by any chance?" Misha asked in amazement, carefully hiding his shotgun in the bushes. "Nope, left the grenades at home in the fridge," I replied with a grin. We cut a couple of branches for ourselves and moved out. Here, the bog was situated among sparse, fluffy spruces and dwarf birches. We moved in single file through the viscous, swampy mud, probing the path ahead of us with dry branches. Fortunately, our ordeal didn't last long. After about 10 minutes, we were on solid ground. Up close, the old, blackened cabins of the desolate settlement seemed larger. A strange smell hung in the air, burnt hair mixed with scorched fat. I took my pistol off safety and positioned myself on one side of a cabin door, while Misha took the other. Then, grabbing the handle, I yanked the door toward me. At that exact moment, an axe flew at me, whistling through the air. I dodged it, and a body dressed in some kind of rags collapsed onto the wooden floor with a dull thud. I stepped into the cabin and swept the room with my light. White, perfectly cleaned human bones were scattered all over the floor. I walked further in, and my jaw literally dropped. On a table stood intricately carved chess pieces, the work of a master jeweler. It wasn't hard to guess what they were carved from. Mother of God, Misha whispered in horror. I checked the body. It was just an ordinary man. We are so screwed. We just killed a guy, Misha stammered. This is at least 10 years in prison. You're worried about the wrong thing right now. What else is there to worry about? Worry about how to get our asses out of here in one piece, I replied, peering out the window, where some kind of commotion was starting. People in ghillie suits were pouring out of the houses, weapons in hand, and heading our way. Thank God there weren't many of them. In a split second, I opened fire. Misha didn't hesitate either, firing back with the rifle. Nod didn't want to draw attention to himself with blatant assistance, but it was noticeable that I didn't miss a single shot, and not a single bullet came my way. A minute later, it was all over. We even managed to capture one of them alive. He confessed everything. It was a criminal enterprise engaged in the illegal harvesting of game, specifically, their organs, fat, and skins. They also crafted souvenirs from special materials. The missing people were their handiwork. As one of them explained, for the security of their operation, they decided to do everything possible to make the locals believe in supernatural forces so they would stop coming into the forest. The next day, I was back in Moscow, reporting to my superiors. The chief was waiting for me, as usual, on a bench by the main entrance. Greetings, Comrade General. Mission accomplished, I reported, sitting down next to him. Hello, Denis. Well done. You unraveled that case quickly. I did my best, Comrade General. Commendable. I've read the materials, but give me the short version. Of course, Pyotr Sergeyevich. This group was involved in fulfilling various orders, from the illegal poaching of wild animals to crafting souvenirs from human skin and bone. For the latter, they desecrated an old, abandoned cemetery nearby. Well, that's something new. And the witness, the locals? Was that their doing too? They did a thorough job. This crime is unique from a criminological standpoint. Everything was done by the book, no tracks, no fingerprints. Pure mysticism. Indeed, not every beast wears the skin of a beast. Well done, Denis. So, is a week of rest enough for you? Pyotr Sergeyevich asked, standing up from the bench. More than enough, I replied with a smile, shaking his hand. Oh, and Denis, who was the ringleader in the end? The director of the forestry service. He came up with the whole mysticism scheme and took the orders, I said, getting into my car. The general waved and went back into the office. I slammed the door and drove home. You did well. You handled everything and pleasantly surprised me. A satisfied voice echoed in my head. Sorry I couldn't help more directly. Our friendship is best kept quiet, unless you're planning a trip to the asylum or somewhere worse. You're right about that, I replied, pressing the accelerator. By the way, I didn't forget about Misha. I helped him get a transfer to a good post. He's now the head of the local forestry service in the Urals. As for me, it was time to rest. New cases were waiting.